Hi guys, welcome to the channel Sluggers Blue for your CAT PRC preparation. In today's session, we'll be taking up the third RC of the genre Culture and Social Sciences. This RC was asked in the second slot of your CAT exam in the year 2019. I've titled the RC as Destruction of Precious Cultural Sites. 516 words, 5 questions. Again, quite standard. So yeah, so let's start. Now, for those of you who might be watching this session for the first time, know that the session is split into two parts. Part one, which is the passage explainer, where I take you through each and every paragraph of the passage and explain it in detail by the use of a schematic diagram. And part two is where I take you through the questions. The current video is part one. What you're watching right now is every session has two videos. This video is part one. And 40 such sessions make up a course that I've titled as an anthology of RCs for your reading comprehension preparation for the CAT. So, and those of you who have not watched the intro video and you are interested to know the details of the course, you can watch the intro video of this course by clicking on a cue card on the top right side of your screen. There should be, you should be able to see a letter I there, and if you click on that, it will show you the thumbnail of the intro video, which you can click and well, check out the details of the course. All right, so let's jump into the passage explainer now. Okay, so now guys, this is the passage explainer part of the video. Your passage explainer screen, your current screen is split into two parts. On the left side is where we'll have the passage, as you can see here. And on the right side is where we'll have the schematic diagrams. Now, the way we'll go about this is that I'll read and explain the passage paragraph by paragraph as the schematic diagram simultaneously appears on the right. Okay, post reading every paragraph, I'll explain the same in detail by the use of the schematic diagram that will have appeared by that time, and then move on to the next paragraph. All right, so let's start with the first paragraph. Okay, so let's start with the first paragraph. War, natural disasters, and climate change are destroying some of the world's most precious cultural sites. Google is trying to help preserve these archaeological wonders by allowing users access to 3D images of these treasures through its site. But the project is raising questions about Google's motivations and about who should own the digital copyrights. Some critics call it a form of digital colonialism. When it comes to archaeological treasures, the losses have been mounting. ISIS blew up parts of the ancient city of Palmyra in Syria, and an earthquake had hit Bagan, an ancient city in Myanmar, damaging dozens of temples in 2016. In the past, all archaeologists and historians had for restoration and research were photos, drawings, remnants, and intuition. But that's changing. Before the earthquake at Bagan, many of the temples on the site were scanned. These scans are on Google's art and culture site. The digital renditions allow viewers to virtually wander the halls of the temple, look up close at paintings, and turn the building over to look up at its chambers. Google Arts and Culture works with museums and other non-profits to put high quality images online. The images of the temples in Bagan are part of a collaboration with SciArc, a non-profit that creates the 3D scanning of historic sites. Google says it doesn't make money off this website, but it fits in with Google's mission to make the world's information available and useful. So guys, that was the reading of your first paragraph. Okay, so guys, I hope that those of you who have read the passage already, you may have realized, that you did realize. I'm not sure if you did, but I hope that you did. That this is one of the more structured write-ups that you might come across while doing any kind of reading, be it for your CAT exam or be it otherwise. And the reason I say that is, if you look at the first few lines of this paragraph, when he starts from war, natural disasters, climate change, and so on and so forth, until a form of digital colonialism. In these lines, the author has essentially captured a very accurate topical view of the whole passage. What do I mean by that is he's given the complete overview of what all he's going to talk about in the passage in these first few lines. Like this is the perfect instance where the central idea can in fact be derived very accurately just from the first set of lines. and that's not something that happens always. Usually it's said that you can get the central idea, or you can try to gauge the primary purpose of the passage from the first few lines or from the last few lines, and there's a good reason and logic behind that, which we'll discuss in the theory sessions. But that doesn't happen in every single case. And this is one of those cases where it does happen. And in fact, it happens just in the first few lines, because he has taken care of all the aspects that he intends to talk about. And there are three aspects to be sure. And the first one is the first aspect where he mentions that how disasters, natural disasters or man-made disasters, are destroying some of the world's most precious cultural sites. The second point that he mentions here is that Google is trying to help preserve these archaeological wonders by allowing users access to 3D images of these treasures through its site. And the third point that he talks about is that, but Google's project is raising questions about Google's motivations and about who should own the digital copyrights of the images that have been created as part of the project. So, and these 3 points are essentially what he's going to talk about throughout the passage, right? He's just all he's going to do. For those of you who have already read, and even those who will probably read it later, you'll see that all he'll do after this is just go into the details of each of these aspects one by one. And he starts with the first aspect right here from here, when he talks about the few of the instances of how some human or natural disasters have destroyed some archaeological sites. And then he goes into the later part. He goes into how in this part, in the second part of the later part of the first paragraph, he talks about how before the earthquake at Bagan, many of the temples on the site were scanned. And so he's giving the details of how Google is going about this project of digitizing the information in the format of 3D images of these archaeological sites. So he's gone into the details of that. He talks about how Google collaborates with museums and non-profit organizations, and in particular, he has mentioned a particular an organization named as SIARC, which is into creating 3D scanning of historic sites, and how Google collaborates with it to get this work done. And then finally, the author closes this paragraph with the argument, with citing Google, which says that it doesn't make money out of this website where it puts up all these images, but rather it still carry it. But the reason why it is carrying on this project is because it fits with its mission to make the world's information available and useful, right? So what the author has done in the first paragraph is he has given you a very accurate topical overview of what he plans to talk about in the passage, and he has gone into the details of the first two aspects of those topics that he intends to talk about. The third aspect is something that he deals with in the second paragraph. Okay, all right. So I hope that's clear. Let's move on to the next paragraph. Okay, coming to the second paragraph. Uh, Critics say the collaboration could be an attempt by a large corporation to wrap itself in the sheen of culture. Ethan Wottrell, an archaeologist, prof professor at Michigan State University and a member of the Society for American Archaeology, says he is not comfortable with the arrangement between SciArc and Google. Wottrell says this project is just a way for Google to promote Google. They want to make this material accessible so people will browse it and be filled with wonder by it, he says. But at its core, it's all about advertisements and driving traffic. Wottrell says these images belong on the site of a museum or educational institution where there is serious scholarship and a very different mission. There's another issue for some archaeologists and art historians. SciArc owns the copyrights of the scans, not the countries where these sites are located. That means the countries need SciArc's permission to use these images for commercial purposes. Erin Thompson, a professor of art crime at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City, says it's the latest example of a Western nation appropriating a foreign culture, a centuries-long battle. SciArc says it copyrights the scans so no one can use them in an inappropriate way. The company says it works closely with authorities during the process, even training local people to help. But Critics like Thompson's are not persuaded. She would prefer the scans to be owned by the countries and people where these sites are located. So, guys, that's the reading of your second paragraph. Okay, so coming to this para, so guys, see, you must have noticed that in this paragraph, the author has essentially talked about, gone into the details of the third aspect of the passage, which was the criticisms pertaining to the project that Google is carrying out. And what's quite interesting and even impressive, if I may say so, about the way the author has structured this paragraph is that it follows the same structure. Like there are two pieces of criticism that he has pointed out, right? The first piece is relates to Google's motivations, which he goes into the detail of in the first part of the second para, and the second piece of criticism relates to the ownership of the copyright ownership of the digital images, which he talks about in the second part of the first para. He has the two criticisms, the two categories of criticisms have been structured in the same way in which they had been listed in the first few lines of the RC of the paragraph. If you notice here, I know this is a little this might be a little difficult for you guys to check because it's blurred, but still I'll just point it out to you. He says that, but the project is raising questions about Google's motivations. So he talks about the first point here and about who should own the digital copyrights. The second criticism here, and he has stuck to this structure. He has stuck to this structure and this and then correspondingly he describes criticisms of both these categories one by one in the same sequence as he comes to the details of this third aspect, right? And that's quite that's something that's noteworthy in terms of how the author has maintained that structure. Anyhow, apart from lauding how the author has maintained a good structure for the passage, how it also helps us, or specifically you learners who want to get the maximum gist of the out of the passage in the shortest possible time, is that, see guys, whenever you see a patterns are easy to remember, structures are easy to remember and recall. Okay, so if you try to compare a passage, if you try to compare your recall of a passage which is well structured with a passage which is not so well structured, your recall will always be better in the first case. In case of a passage which is well structured, where you know, okay, what the author has talked about, the three types of this, what are the factors of this, and the third factor causes this, and so on and so forth. If it is well structured, or in fact, if you have, and moreover, if it is well structured and you have been able to gauge what the structure is, it becomes very easy for you to go through the passage quickly, gain all the comprehend all all that the author wants to convey on a central level, and if required, get to the right point of reference when answering specific questions. And central idea question you'll anyways will be able to answer quite easily if you've understood the structure of the passage properly. Okay, and that's the reason why I'm spending so much of time in discussing this aspect. Anyhow, so let's talk about let's go into the details of this. So in the first piece of criticism, the author basically talks about, he says that how a particular archaeologist or professor at Michigan State University has expressed some reservations in the collaboration with respect to the collaboration of Google with the non-profit organization SCIARC, and how he suspects that the ulterior motive of the MNC of Google is basically to generate ad revenues and generate traffic on its website on the basis of these images, right? That's the first piece of criticism. So he's alleging that the motivations are not as selfless as Google purports them to be. That's the first piece of criticism. Second piece of criticism the author says is that to bring in the second piece of criticism, the author has again cited another expert, Erin Thompson, in particular, a professor of art crime at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and he says that according to her, this is this case where SCIARC has the ownership, the copyright ownership of the images, and not as opposed to the countries where these sites are situated. This scenario is a very typical example of the Western countries appropriating foreign cultures, appropriating a foreign culture. So something that has been going on since centuries, and this is just a new form of the same concern or the same phenomena that has been going on for centuries, where a Western nation appropriates a foreign culture according to its needs. right? So he cites this as an instance of that phenomena, and uh, and the author has also cited that Sayark has provided counter arguments in terms of how in terms of providing the reason why it has copyrighted those images to keep them from being used inappropriately, and it also says that it works closely with the authorities during the process, and also even trains local people to help. But but uh, but the but our expert here, Erin Thompson, is not convinced with that, and would want to believe that is of the opinion that the copyright of these pictures should belong to the country and the people where these sites are located, right? So that's the second piece of criticism, and that's where the author closes the whole the paragraph, the passages. That's where the passage closes. So I hope you were able to understand and get the gist of the second para as well, and the whole passage. So coming to the central idea, it can be summed up in the following lines. Disasters, natural or otherwise, have wreaked havoc on some of the world's most precious cultural sites. And as Google tries to help preserve them by digitizing their 3D images, questions and concerns have been raised by critics as to Google's motivation to do so, as well as the ownership of the copyrights of the images. So, guys, that will be a central idea of the passage. Okay, guys, so now for those of you who have not attempted the questions so far, you can do so by clicking on the link given in the description of uh, of the video, and it will take you to the link will take you to an interface where you can attempt the where you can read the passage as well as attempt the questions. And yeah, so that's about it so far as this video is concerned. Those of you who have not watched the intro video of the course, you can do so by clicking on the link here, and so do subscribe to the channel. I'll see you meanwhile in the next part where we discuss the questions of the passage. Okay.